Ken has worked for the Kansas Department of Health and Environmental Bureau of Waste Management for 26 years. He spent most of that time in the Solid Waste Processing Facilities Permits Unit. Ken is currently the Section Chief over the Compliance and Enforcement Waste Reduction and Assistance Section. Ken has a bachelor and master degrees in agricultural education from Kansas State University, and he has also completed all of the classwork for a master's in public health from Wichita State University. And with that, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Ken.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here. Like Liz said, I've been around a long time, and part of what has excited me so much about what I've got to do in my job is that we got to develop a brand new program on managing livestock mortalities that didn't exist when I started here. And the reason it exists is because back in about 99, my boss came across the hallway and said, "Ken, you're going to a meeting with me." And I said, "Oh, what's it about?" And he says, "Well, they said something about dead animals. You're the only guy I've got with an ag background, so you're going." And that's how I got started in this. It's been a fun ride, and I think here in Kansas we've looked at where we're at and said that we really need to make sure we pay attention, that we're stepping out, that we're ahead of the game as far as we can be, because if anything ever happens, we want to be ready. And I attribute that to a lot of the others that have come before me, as well as a lot of the others that are still working both at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and over at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. The biggest reason we started talking about what we needing to train additional SMEs was my retirement's coming up quick, maybe even quicker than what I thought. But essentially in the next year, I'm going to be retired, and we need somebody else that can take over. And we looked at, okay, can we bring people in from other parts of the country? The answer was probably not, because if we have a foreign animal disease going on in Kansas, it's going to be going on everywhere. And there's just not enough SMEs to cover what we need. So we looked at what else can we do, and we looked at what Kansas economy looks like. And if you look at the 2019 numbers, we were number 3 in all cattle and calves, cattle on feed number 3, beef cows 6, pigs 10, goats 11. And I didn't know we had that many goats, but apparently we've got a lot of them. And sheep and lambs 15, milk cows 16. And then, and we've got some very, very large operations. So we want to make sure that we are ready, and we don't leave something to chance. We looked at what have we got available to us, and I knew that there were 6 people that had taken the preliminary composting course, either through Maine or through Cornell, and were ready to move on and look at, do they want to be an SME? 4 of those said yes, they wanted to step up, take the 2 weeks of training, and to become an SME. Having the SMEs in Kansas will give us that rapid response we want. And the people over at Department of Agriculture keep telling me it's not a matter of when, or but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a fad is going to occur. And so we want to be ready. We want to step out, and, the pictures you're seeing here are the site that we were working at. If it looks muddy, that's because it was. It had rained for most of 2 weeks by the time we got there. This gentleman that owns this facility, his pad is a compacted clay pad that has a gravel overlay on it. And so even though it had rained that much, and there you can see the mud there, we were only sinking down about ½ an inch. The equipment was not sinking. Was still able to maneuver and work. The animals you see laying there are ones. This is a commercial operation where what he does is, he farms over 1,000 acres of ground, and he takes livestock from several feed yards. These are ones that somebody just brought. He doesn't have a gate on the facility, so people can just bring their livestock at any time of the day. The horse you see he takes all varieties, all species. And so, it gives us a good variety of things to work with. And the piles you see in the background are his carbon source. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. How did we develop this? Well, we started out with some conversations between me and our Kansas Department of Agriculture, and they were working with USDA, who had some funding, and they were able to secure that funding. I worked with Lori Miller and Robert Minkus and developed a curriculum that we thought would provide everything that a SME would need to know. And we're going to talk about the curriculum later on here, but it's based on the requirements that are of an SME, of what is it that an SME needs to do. And then we included some general background information. I was on the development phase of several documents through USDA that we had developed for the SMEs, and so I included those in the training because I felt that they were very important documents. And we also had the curriculum from the University of Maine and Cornell University to be able to look at and say, okay, we want to develop what they already have and work forward from there. So that's what we looked at. That's what we did. I don't know whether any of you have ever seen this, but this is the form that an SME would look at to evaluate someone who has gone through this 2 weeks of training or 2 weeks of battle testing during an emergency and be able to say, yes, they qualify as an SME. I said we'd talk some about the materials. The material there is some straw that is not exactly ground, but there's a place not too far away from where this facility is at that makes straw mats for road construction, and he goes and picks up all of the straw that falls through those mats. It's too small to stay on there. And so, he gets a lot of material that way. He doesn't have to pay for it. You're also going to see some wood waste that's, part of those mats. You're going to see some carbon where he goes and picks up some burned material to add higher carbon. He's looking at what can he do to build nutrient capacity and nutrient holding in his soils, and so he uses a variety of materials. And the person you see standing there is one of our trainees. So here's where we're really getting started looking at, the base mix, and what it looks like. But the training itself, when we put together a notebook that had all of the materials that we thought that they would need, a syllabus in there, and then a table of contents that had all of these materials. Like I said, I was in on the development of several of these. Some were developed before I got in on it. And so, but I wanted to bring those in because these materials are all very important type materials. I think that can do a lot of good. Even if you're not going to be a subject matter expert, reviewing some of these materials, if you want to compost livestock, it goes through the hows, the whys, it goes through, problems that you might encounter, those kind of things. And so these materials give you a really, really good background in training. And, and I probably at least once a year go through every one of those and make sure, okay, what have I forgot? What do I need to look at? What do I need to be thinking about? Because, that, a matter of when, not if, really worries me. And, I want to make sure that we have everything we need in place so that we, have the least amount of damage to our economy that we can have. Now, the subject matter expert is required to be the original requirement was 10 days of on-site at an emergency. Well, in Kansas, we have not had a true emergency in quite a few years. The large poultry flocks, in Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, and farther east, some of the swine facilities that have had some issues. We've not had that here in Kansas. And so, we've had some facilities we could go to and look at, but you're there for one day and you don't really get a good training in doing that. And so that's why we said we really need to put this together as you're going to be on site. Doesn't matter what the weather is, because an emergency is going to happen in the worst weather. You can see the water standing there in that picture. It was wet. We had rain for several days, and the pile of material you see there is some finished compost that he had screened a couple of weeks before. He really wanted it to dry out just a little more so he could be spreading it on his fields. All it kept doing was raining, so made it a little difficult to be able to do a lot. But he was working with us and helping us out there to understand, this is a final product, and that's what he really aims for. And as SMEs, we're going to be there on the start, building the pile and getting it up and operating. We're not going to be there because USDA only worries about getting rid of the disease. Once the disease is gone, the SME is not going to be there anymore. And so, I talked to him a lot about how do you train that on-site operator to be able to make it so that it makes it all the way to that finished compost. It was 10 half days. The reason, you see, we did some afternoons and some, some mornings was because we tried to make it so that people could come in later on Monday. They could get some stuff done in the office if they need to come in. Then Tuesday and Wednesday, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, go home Wednesday afternoon, come back Thursday afternoon. And, it was trying to be realistic on everybody's schedule too, because this is a large amount of time. And so it's a matter of what do we need to do? Our first day was strictly a classroom day where I went over all the stuff that was in the manual, that notebook that we gave them. The remaining days we were at the composting site, and I just flat told them, if it's snowing, we're there. If it's 105 degrees, we're there. Well, we did this the end of March. Knew it wasn't going to be 105 degrees, but we also knew snow, cold. Most of the days we were there, we never actually got rained on, but it was in the mid to upper 30s to the mid to upper 40s with anywhere from a 15 to 35, 40 mile an hour breeze. And so the conditions were realistic. But we took time each day to meet before we went out onto the compost site, ask questions, discuss what we'd seen the day before, discuss what we needed to be doing, those kind of things. This picture's kind of gross. Hopefully none of you are eating your lunch at the moment. If you are, sorry, this probably just ruined it. But this was, we actually worked with a renderer. They work with a large sow facility, and this was basically a 2 days of death loss. They brought it all over there so it could be part of our, the realistic part of our training was, we need animals, and this was what we got. But, we reviewed in the classroom on that first day all of the things. If you haven't had a chance, the carcass management course that USDA has out there, Chapter 9 is on composting. This is the link. Hopefully it works. Some days it does, some days it doesn't for me. But it is go to the APHIS website. It's a fantastic chapter just to get an understanding of composting livestock. I ask everybody to review that prior to the first day because it really helped get them to understand and get them going on what it was that we needed to be talking about. Then we did some introductions, talked about their experience, and then the biggest question, probably the most important one to me, is why do they want to do something like this? Why do they want to be the one that's going to be making sure that the composting facility is built correctly, operated correctly? They're not going to be the operator. They don't have any authority to order materials. They don't have any authority. Why do you want to be just essentially this consultant working for making sure that this is taken care of? And then, the answers all pretty much came back. We care about agriculture. We care about the farmers in the state of Kansas, and we want to make sure that, they are taken care of. And so that's what I was hoping for. The requirements of an SME are understanding how to build a windrow, understanding how to monitor that windrow, understanding when we turn it, because livestock composting is different than a standard leaf and grass one or about anything else you're going to compost. You do differently when you do it as livestock. And then what happens if there's something going wrong? How do you troubleshoot what's going on? How do you understand what's going on? And this was where it was really good to have the operator of this facility with us most of the time we were there, because he's operated this site now for, I think, going on 12 or 13 years. And, he's seen about everything. He's had about every problem you can have, and he's overcame them. And so when it came to talking about troubleshooting, we had somebody there that could truly answer their questions. You've got to be the one that comes on site and evaluates if it's going to be, an outside one. If it's going to be cattle or hogs, it's more than likely going to be outside. If it's going to be poultry, you may be in the barn or you may be outside. You've got to evaluate that area and say, here's where we need to build the compost site. Here's how we need to do it. Those kind of things. You've got to be able to select a carbon source. What happens, if wood waste is not available? If you can't get ground wood or you can't get ground straw, what else have you got available? Well, this guy uses a lot of waste grain. He uses the straw from that mat factory. He uses some wood waste he finds here or there. He uses, whatever he can find that's a high carbon source to do this with. He also, gets pen pack manure from his own livestock feeding facility as well as another one. So he's got, how do you select those? How do you estimate how much carbon you need? And, the beautiful thing is part of what we look at when we look at what USDA APHIS has available, they've got a calculator that will calculate a very rough estimate of what it is you're going to need. And so at least you can get that. And, I showed them all of these things. You're going to need a temperature probe. How do you make sure that it's accurate? How do you do the readings of it? How deep into the pile do you need to go? And then probably one of the tougher but yet very important parts of all this is, how do you talk to that producer about, he's just lost his entire livelihood. How do you talk to him about that? It's going to be a while before he gets that livelihood back and can bring animals in there. You're asking him to set up a composting site. How do you get him to understand what that means, what his employees need to be doing, what he needs to be doing on that composting site? If if the producer just throws his hands up in the air and says, "Hey, I'm out of here," and you're going to be working with some contractor, how do you talk to a contractor that probably knows nothing about agriculture and getting them to understand what it is you need to do? And so it's all of these requirements of an SME are very important, and so we have to make sure that we cover those in detail with them, and we did. We did a really good job, and then we used all of these as background questions for what we did the next 9 days out there at the site. We got a little deeper into the dashboard, which is where you can estimate your amount of material you need based on the number of livestock you think you're going to get. What kind of equipment do you need? That loader is great. What happens if you don't have a big loader like that? What happens if you have to have a tractor with a bucket? What happens if all you got's a bobcat? And then we talked about the fad prep and some of the stuff on that, and looked at some of those kind of things. And then, we looked at what truly is their job, because, I mentioned it earlier. You're not the one operating the site. You're not the one truly in charge of anything other than saying this is what it takes to really have a good site and have it work properly. You have to evaluate the location, recommend the design, what type and source of carbon, inspect that carbon material. And this was one of the things when I was talking to some of the other SMEs. They said the inspection of that carbon material is so important because what you ordered may or may not be what you receive. And so you've got to be able to stand there and say, hey, that carbon's not going to work. Get it out of here and make sure that they get the right stuff in. What kind of equipment? And, I said it's great to have that loader, but what happens if you don't have that? What happens if you got to have something else? You've got to be able to figure out how to make it work. You're going to oversee the windrow construction. Oh, I missed the just-in-time training of the site operator. Some of these guys may have some experience, and that's great if they do, but a lot of them are not going to have any experience. And that means that you've got to take time to train them on what it is that needs to happen. You see that base windrow that he's got, we talk about it needs to be 18 to 24 inches. Well, what does that mean? That's knee deep on most people. That's what we talk about. Make sure this thing's at least knee deep. Well, that works for them. They understand that. Once you've got it up and built, then you start taking your temperature readings. Are they taking them correctly? Do they understand how many they need to take based on the length of the windrow? Do they understand where in the windrow to take it? Do they, all of those have to become part of it. And then, 4 or 5 or 6 days later, when it's become routine, are they still doing it correctly? And that's the one thing that I have noticed is, it becomes routine and say, oh, well, I don't necessarily need to take 6 readings in this one, or I can get by with 4. Well, no, you can't. And that's why you've got to keep on top of it. And then every day you need to discuss with that producer and the contractor, if there is one, what concerns do they have? What are what our needs do you have? And then you've got to send that up the chain to the incident management team so that they can get you what you need. We talked a lot about ICS, how it works, how to don and doff the PPE, how to decontaminate the equipment. What do we do with that decontamination water and materials? Well, what can you do with some of this stuff? What supplies do you need? And I'm not going to go through all of that, but I will tell you that you'll see a picture later on when, because the first week it was wet. No problem with dust or anything. The second week it dried up. We had 45-mile-an-hour wind one day. You see a picture of a person with goggles on, and you could actually hear the stuff hitting the goggles. Goggles are an important part, just like the rest of this material is. The thermometers need to be a 3-foot stem thermometer. It's fantastic if you've got one of those quick reading ones, but most of us are going to have the one you stick it in 18 inches, you wait a couple of minutes, read it, you stick it the rest of the way in, wait a few minutes, read it, pull it out, and move to the next one. It's not a fast process. You need the APHIS SOP guides and forms, and they're all out there on the website. You're going to need a notebook with paper to take notes. Some kind of a writing utensil, and I told them all I prefer using a pencil, and they looked at me like, who uses a pencil anymore? Everybody uses an ink pen. Well, if you've ever tried to write on paper when it's sprinkling or raining or wet, you'll find out why you want a pencil. And then you need some kind of a phone to communicate not only with, the people that are on site, the ICS team, but you're also going to need that phone, because if something goes wrong and you just can't figure it out, call one of the other SMEs across the country. You've got that phone, call them, because they can make a difference. And that's one of the things that I tried to help them understand, is we do have that ability, to answer questions for them. And the next few slides here, I'm going to go through pretty quickly, because what it was, they all kind of say the same thing, except for, this is what we did each day as we were out there. The first day, we went out to the actual site. We sat down with the producer on the tailgate of the pickup, and we discussed with them what it is that's going on, what kind of animals we might be looking at, how many. We communicated with our federal site manager or the incident management team, which, for lack of a better term, was me and one person from our Department of Ag. We talked about what it takes. We worked with them to understand, how to build the rows. And like I said, having a guy there that was highly experienced in doing this truly helped our SMEs understand what it was that they were being trained to do. Talk to them about how many carcasses, we ended up building about 180 to 200 foot windrow, put over 60,000 pounds of carcasses in that windrow. And in 2 to 3 days, we were getting pretty good temperatures, even though it was 40 degrees outside. So and it was getting down into the upper 20s at night. We talked about needing moisture. Well, it had been pretty wet. And so we were able to get by without having to have any moisture initially, but we probably should have a little later on. Again, we met with the producer on the next day. We talked to our management team. We talked about adding additional carcasses to the windrow. This time we pulled the equipment operator in and talked to them a little bit about, okay, we saw some things. You've got a couple animals that aren't covered as well as we'd like. Those kind of things. And and it was, it may sound like I was doing the talking, but I really wasn't. I was having the trainees do the talking, and I was only filling in if I needed to, so that they got the experience of doing this. And, and got the experience of really talking to a producer and how it works. We started monitoring the windrow, started putting our temperature probes in on really the third day they were out there, and we actually had a couple of spots in the windrow that were already at 130 degrees. We had a couple of spots that never did get to there, and we talked about how, what to do about that. But that 130 degrees is kind of the magical number. You need to be above it a little bit, but getting to the 130 degrees in just a couple, 3 days was great. And it'll happen if you build the windrows correctly. Friday we monitored. That's all we did, other than talk and discuss what was going on. We were beginning to see a few problems though by then, and so we started implementing some plans for mitigating what those problems were. Mainly the problems we were seeing were animals that weren't completely covered. A couple of places where we had a rumen that might have hopped on us, and things had collapsed a little bit. Had one place where it was very obvious we had a coyote sleeping on top of the pile. Wasn't digging in it, but it was obvious that they were sleeping on top of it. How do you get rid of a predator like that? And so we started talking about on that. The next Monday, again, we had the contractor there. We had our management team. We talked about what was going on. And then we started really digging into what were problems with the windrows, what was going on. We brought some flags in, and we flagged spots in the windrow where we said, well, it's not covered quite as much here. We had one place where you could, you could see a real concern because you could see the material from the rumen oozing out and bubbling. And so how do you take care of that? What do you need to do? And, we discussed all those items. And, it was a really good training opportunity for them to see these kind of things. One of the big questions, and it was the producer that actually brought this up, and I talked to him a little bit about flies earlier, but he had a place where there were a lot of flies all of a sudden. I mean, it's 45 degrees and we got flies. Well, he just flat said, anytime he sees flies like that, that's his indication that he needs to bring more cover in. And so he did. And, Tuesday was additional. Wednesday, we started talking a little bit about, okay, you're only going to be here a couple of weeks and then you're going to be transferring this over. What do you need? What kind of material do you need to be passing on to the next SME coming in? On Thursday, we really discussed that, so that Thursday evening, after they got done, Thursday evening, they went back to the hotel and they put together a communication to go to the next site manager that said, here's what all we saw. Here's the problems we saw. Here's, what went in. Here's the materials we used. Here's where, the hot spots were. Here's where the cool spots were. All of those kind of things were built into this to be ready to pass on to the next SME coming in. And then Friday we did essentially a pass off, even though we didn't have an SME coming in. But we did that so that we had a closeout of our 2 weeks there. So we really made sure that they understood what they had done. And it was really a very good experience. Here's the picture with the goggles. You can see it's a bright sunny day. Well, it got up to, I think actually it got up into the upper 50s, maybe even lower 60s that day, but it was blowing 45 mile an hour. And so the goggles were a necessity that day. We've done some additional training since then. We did a 3-day compost school to kind of match what Maine and Cornell put on, trying to get some additional people ready so that they could be looking at it. We had 9 that came to that training. 8 of them have said that, yes, they want to do the 2-week training to become SMEs. So next March, we're going to be doing this training all over again, although instead of me being the one in charge, it's going to be our new SMEs that are in charge, and I'll just be sitting back listening so that I can see what all's going on and just see that everything's going the way we think it ought to. We keep hoping that we don't experience a fad here in Kansas, but we're going to keep training because we're realistic, and we want to be realistic with our exercises. And this is part of that. One of the things I've talked to our SMEs about is we want to make sure that we communicate often with KDA, with USDA APHIS, with KDEM, which is our Kansas Department of Emergency Management, and others. We want to make sure that we sit in on the webinar so we keep our training current. And then we want to spend time in the field observing the livestock composting operations. And I know that at least one, but I think two of our SMEs have gone back to the site to see the windrow again to make sure everything was still working right, to discuss it with the facility manager, just to see that everything was going good. You see, our idea is that we start with this, animals that have died for whatever reason, with materials that we think will make good composting materials. We build this so that we take care of the disease, we encapsulate it, we get it hot, we kill the disease, and then we move to this, which is a finished compost that is now ready for the operator to use on their fields so that they have a product that is valuable to them. We don't waste that protein. We've actually used it and have something that can be of value to them. And I'm ready for questions.
Okay, thanks, Ken. If anyone would like to ask a question, you can put your question in the chat. We'll give everybody a couple more minutes.
Well, I will say that I'm excited about this training because I think it gives us the opportunity to really be able to, to be much more ready in the event that we do have a foreign animal disease come in.
So we have one comment. Just want to say great job. That's from Don Beckett. And then the other question is the manual available to non-attendees?
We could make it available. I mean, everything is online on APHIS, except for maybe a couple of things. But I could send out the list. I could send Liz the list of everything that's in there, and you could pass that out. The more people that have this, the happier I am.
Yeah, if you can send me that link, that would be great. I'll make sure that all the attendees here get it, and then they can pass that out. We do have another question. Would composting pigs with ASF kill the African swine fever virus?
And I would have to leave that up to some of our veterinarians to answer it for sure. But the research that I've read says yes, it will, as long as we do it correctly. And so, but if there's a veterinarian on that could answer that question, I would really prefer they did.
So while we're waiting, let's go in. How large in acres is the compost site?
The one that this gentleman has is about 18 acres. He can handle, from what he tells me, relatively close to, 550, 600,000 pounds of animals at a time, without overloading his site. And, and he figures a 3 to 4 month composting operation on them.
Okay, the other question was, can you post the link for the carbon calculator?
That is out on USDA APHIS's website. It's in the fat. I don't remember which one it's in, but it's in one of the. Hang on. pull up
You can
my,
look for it. Yeah, I can look for it and see if I can get the link out.
let's, it's in the one that says USDA APHIS Carcass Management Dashboard. It's in that dashboard is where it's at.
Okay.
And so that's on slide 9.
Okay. The next question is this SME a once and done program, or do you like to see update training over time for new info?
As I said, I do everything I can to listen to webinars, to other presentations. I go to conferences when I have the availability to go to conferences. I do everything I can to keep my training up. Yes, I've talked to others, and I think all of us agree that additional training would be fantastic. Because once and done is not. Composting is too complex, and our thoughts on it are changed. We have the newer method of the above ground composting that has been developed by Gary. That is I think has some real possibilities. So there's those options that, so yes, I think additional training is always great.
Okay, another question, comment, the lessons learned and unique events. How are you capturing this information for the next classes?
No, I didn't understand.
I'm not sure either. It just talks about there's a lot of lessons learned and, unique events that happened. But I guess they're asking how you're capturing the information for future classes.
Like I said, I listen to all the webinars I can. When I get documents that I can pull in, I shove them into that notebook so that I've got them available. And when I see, training coming up, these guys all get an email from me that says, hey, here's some training coming up you may want to look at. So that's how I've been capturing it.
Okay. Does the SME set up contracts with third-party companies to gain access to large quantities of a carbon source?
Okay, the SME does not do the contracting. That's all done through the ICS and how the ICS is set up. What the SME will say is, based on the number of animals we've got, we need this quantity of material. Here's our preference for what the material should be based on what should be available in the area. And in Kansas, we have lists of sites where they can go to that have grinders, that have wood waste material available, that have hay and straw available, that have crop stover available, that have manure available. And so we have those lists already built, and so the SMA can use those and point the whoever in the ICS may be, in logistics that's going out and purchasing this stuff, says, okay, here's where you can go to look to purchase this stuff. But the SME is not actually going to be the one writing the contracts. That's going to be done through the ICS.
Okay. The next question is, can other states do this training too?
I hope so. I really, truly hope so. That's why I'm doing everything I can to make it as available as possible. I'll share the manual. I'll share everything that was in there. Like I said, we're going to do this again next March. If somebody wants to come and watch what we do, I think we would be very open to allowing that to happen. You bring your all-weather gear because it's all weather. And we're going to be out there. It doesn't matter what the weather is. But yeah, we're glad to share because I'm passionate about this, but I also understand that one state, one group is not going to be enough. If an FAD happens, it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive, and it's going to be all hands on deck. So we need as many trained as we can get.
I think this question is what SME and Windrow means. Sorry, I missed. Well, SME would be subject matter expert. And then can you explain what Windrow means?
Okay, a windrow is just, is essentially a pile of material that is in a row. And we, going back to the old days of when we made windrows to make hay, with the, that's where the terminology comes from, because that's what it looks like, is a windrow of hay. Only it's a very large one that, in this case, buried in the middle of it is carcasses.
Okay. And how long per ton does it take to finalize a compost pile?
A lot of that depends on the size of the animal, the temperature you're able to maintain, but we tell people with large animals, cattle, 1,000-pound steer, that if they build the pile correctly, 1,000-pound steer, you're going to have most of the flesh gone, the hide gone, those kind of things should be gone in about 2.5 to 3 months. The bones will take another turning and then probably another couple of months on that, depending on how hard you're working it. A small pig or a chicken or, even a turkey can go, in 2 to 3 weeks. I was working with a chicken facility, here in the state, where they were composting their mortalities. They were a layer facility, and they were able to compost their layers and take the compost out of the bin in anywhere from 10 to 14 days. So it really depends on the size of the animal, depends on how hard you want to work it, how well you build the pile, those kind of things.
Okay, the next question is, this person says, I may have missed this, but can you comment on grinding procedures and their effect on aerosolization of tissues? The thought process is, how would grinding of ASF carcasses affect the area around the composting site?
Well, I will say that grinding is a very good method for speeding up the composting operation, because now you take a very large carcass and make it into small chunks. Obviously, you've sped up the process considerably. You'll get heat a lot faster, and the heat will stay there better that way. The aerosolization, I know there have been some studies out there. Again, that's one of those, I'm going to leave it up to the experts that have done the studies to be able to say that. But I think they've found out if you put some wood waste in there, put the carcass in there, put more wood waste in as it's going through there, there's not a lot of aerosolization. But again, I'd like somebody from one of the universities has done some studying on that to really answer that question instead of me.
Okay, and the last question we have in the chat is, it seems like using full cattle and horse carcasses, there would still be some large bones present after 3 to 4 months. Does he grind or filter and recycle?
That's up to the operator. The operator that we were working with, he had a screen. He screened everything out. Anything that screened out went right back into the next pile. The bones, the other, any other parts that might still be there went right back into the next pile. I've also got a swine facility that when they take theirs out, they screen it. They've got a hay grinder. They put the bones in there. They grind the bones, and then they spread them on the field with the material. It's really it's up to the operator, I guess, at that point.
Okay.
Yes, there will be some bones left. You don't get rid of all of them.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions. Who pays for the facility operation? Is it fee-based? And if so, what is the average cost per carcass?
This facility that we were working with, it's a private individual. He takes the animals for free, and then he and gets all of his other material for free. he never commented on how much his costs were, and we didn't ask because it is a private individual. Maybe somebody from Department, our Kansas Department of Ag that actually did the contract work on this, because all I had to do was train. I didn't have to deal with any of the paperwork, so I don't know the costs on it. I don't have any idea.
Okay. And we do have a comment from Rob Mitchell. He said aerosolization while grinding is being studied and evaluated with the U.S. EPA, and information will be forthcoming. So that's interesting. So hopefully we'll get some of that information too. And
Which
the
is
other
why I
comment
said, I'd like the experts to weigh in. I don't, I don't know the answer.
And then the other comment was co-grinding with composting material may help reduce aerosols. So good comments. Great presentation, Ken.
Well, thank you very much. And, thanks for allowing me to do this. I want to share this. I want it out there.
And thank you, on behalf of the VS National Training and Exercise Program, I'd also like to thank you for doing this presentation. And just for the folks that are still online, if you guys have any ideas for webinars that, the VS NTEP can explore for emergency preparedness, just feel free to contact me. And as always, you can find webinars on vaccine and other topics on the TEP Video Gallery online, which is at the APHIS USDA Animal Health Training and Development Video Gallery. And be sure to watch your upcoming emails for our upcoming webinar series that we will continue to do next month. Great comments, Ken. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Thanks for the presentation. Having backup SME is important. So with that, I thank you again, Ken, and I will bid everyone a great afternoon.